are now on our way to northern India. Our Pullman car is at the end of the train. We arrived at the little way station of Sathiana early in the morning and soon transferred the baggage from our private car to bullock carts that were waiting to transport us to our camp some miles further away. It was slow traveling in these carts and very jolting, but we eventually arrived at the government rest house, around which we pitched our tents and made ourselves at home. It was a busy life here in camp. We had men to do every conceivable job, men to do the sweeping, and although a low-caste man, he was certainly one of the most aristocratic-looking people in the place. The cook was a lazy fellow. He did nothing but cook. He was very proud he would do nothing else. We had to have men to fetch water for him and do nothing else but fetch water. Then again, we had men to collect firewood. They went out every day and brought in cartloads of wood to keep the campfires burning. We had many elephant men to look after the elephants, and these fellows could be seen in the early morning crouching by the fire, trying to keep their bones warm. It's a cold life here at this time of the year in the mornings, although during the day it gets very hot indeed. We had elephants, and elephants, you know, must be fed. Here comes in breakfast for one elephant. An elephant, I must tell you, eats very nearly a ton of food a day, and he keeps quite a fleet of other elephants busy, providing for those that are used during the shoot. When it came to traveling about, we sat on what we call a pad elephant, or possibly a howdah elephant if you had a rifle and wanted to stand up. A pad elephant you see on the screen now, with his pad on his back, and the mahout, or elephant driver, standing beside him. He drives his elephant by means of the ankus, an iron bar with a hook and one point, which he jabs behind the ears of the elephant to make him go right or left. When the ankus is not in use, he hangs it on the ear of the elephant. Now look at the elephant's eye. That eye has looked out upon 100 years of life. What a wise old eye it is. When it comes to mounting the elephant, the mahout takes the front elevator, and up he goes. And once on the head, he must arrange his blanket so that he can seat himself comfortably behind the ears. In that position, he cannot possibly fall off. Now, how is the sportsman going to mount? He has to go up by the back staircase. Somebody holds the tail, and he steps on the tail, and then clambers aloft, takes his rifle, and off he goes. Now, a howdah elephant is generally mounted by means of a ladder. Up it goes, in you get, and then up you go, and hold on. Otherwise, you may get thrown out. And now we're ready to start. Off goes one of the sportsmen on a pad elephant. The rest follow in a long line. You notice the howdahs are empty because it's more comfortable riding on the pad. The line of elephants stretches back of us, and the country goes up and down. Many people get seasick riding on the back of an elephant. In front of us, other elephants streak away into the jungle in quest of gone or swamp deer. Soon we come to the swamps, and our great mammoth animals are plunging their way through, wading through feet of deep water, and we sit there comfortably on their backs, enjoying the sunshine and the fresh morning air. See how they plow through that water, waving their trunks back and forth, and the howdah swaying to and fro, and the man in the howdah just as if he was at sea on board a ship. soon we come to the locality where the swamp deer are to be found. A line is formed through the grass, and gradually we beat up. Before long, there is a flash ahead of us, and we will see a swamp deer dashing off through the water. There go a couple of does. We will not shoot those, we let them go. There are some more, close behind them. The line still advancing. Other specimens dash forth, but they are not worthy to be mounted in a museum. They are small ones. But wait, we're going to get a big fellow before long. There goes one now. Look out for the man on the howdah. He's ready with his gun. There he goes. Again, a second shot. And forward. Hurry the line forward now. And there's our prize. A wonderful specimen. Antlers measuring something like 38 inches. The men soon gather round, and he's hoisted up onto the back of the old elephant, securely tied, and then back to camp he goes. That evening, when we get back to camp, we measure up the antlers. That is a fine pair, and you will see them in the Museum of Natural History in New York City. In order to reach the habitat of the great one-horned rhinoceros, we traveled by boat up the Gandak River. We did not employ motor-driven craft. All we had was manpower, and only one man at that. After a day's journey, we camped, and the following morning we encountered some elephants sent down to the bank of the river by His Highness the Maharaja of Nepal. On the backs of these great beasts, we traveled over hill and dale with our bag and baggage. And late that evening, we arrived once more on the banks of the Gandak River, with the sun setting across its ever-moving waters in a lovely stream. Early next morning, our baggage was brought up from the boat and placed in camp. Hot on the track, trying to drive them out. The tiger is probably the least concerned animal in the ring. We're all desperately excited. And now, suddenly, with a woof and a roar, whoo, here he comes, big tiger, and followed quickly by a second. The ring is broken. Out comes the tiger here, over the nullery goes, into the jungle, and disappears. He is quickly followed by a second, an enormous fellow, great massive limbs, and in he goes, following the other tiger. Off go the elephants with the shikaris on their backs, hastening off to see in what direction the tigers take. They see them, one of them at least, going up on the bank on the corner of the screen. We return to the ring. Pandemonium exists. Everybody is talking. There's another tiger there. And there he is, right in the center of the screen now. He's barely 30 feet from the camera, and he's moving. Here comes an elephant to drive him out. And here you see the tiger looking out, wondering what's going to happen next. But his day has come. Watch the man on the right, in the howdah. He has a shot. And then he takes a second shot. And then the ring converge. In they go to the center, everybody talking and wondering what has happened. We want to see that tiger. Is it a big tiger? Is it a little tiger? Is it a tiger or is it a tigress? Everybody's asking questions. The jungle people collect about. And in they crowd, everybody dismounts and goes in on foot to see what the prize looks like. The first thing to do is to get the tiger out into the open so that we can get a picture of him. A place is cleared, a litter is made, and out he is brought into the daylight where you can see him to good advantage. The jungle people are crowding about, only too delighted to assist in this affair. Another tiger has gone to his doom, and life will be safer for them in the future. Congratulations are offered to the sportsman who laid the tiger low. We must now hurriedly get one of the elephants to load the tiger and carry him away. A big fellow is brought in, but he is very reluctant about carrying the load. Elephants do not like tigers when they're alive. They don't even like them when they're dead, and don't want to have anything to do with them. You see how this elephant gets up and refuses to carry the tiger. Another elephant is then brought in, but he likewise is very reluctant about sitting down and taking the load. The mahout hits him on the head. But an elephant's head is over a foot thick, so it takes more than a little tap like that to give him a headache. The tiger is soon loaded up, and off we hasten in pursuit of those other two tigers that broke the ring and escaped to another portion of the jungle. A tiger never runs far, even after such an experience as this. He is a fearless creature. The two that broke the ring were located not far off, and soon our 100 elephants were encircling them for a second time. The ring spread to the right through a sea of tall nurket grass, and to the left against a dense patch of jungle where the animals were bound to retreat if disturbed. In the trees we had men, and I also was up in the branches of a tree so as to get a better view in the ring. Slight diversion was caused at the start by the presence of a snake in the grass, a large python. The head shikari caught it by the tail and pulled it out. Vultures were collecting. They sensed food. Human vultures also were on hand, but they had to work if they were going to get any food. So we sent them to the jungle to collect sticks and boughs, branches, in order that we might fashion a lean-to under which we could place the skin of our rhino. There are no pockets in this part of the world, although one man had a wooden one in rather a curious position. They worked with very primitive tools, that curious sickle-shaped knife and stakes sharpened to a point. With the latter, They dug holes in the ground, and in the holes they put the uprights, and then leaves and branches on top, and finally a nice shelter was made. At noontime, everybody had to stop work, and so we went with them to the village to make their acquaintance. There we found some of the villagers in curious poses. This one, for instance, standing on one leg. We were introduced to some of the small children, and we watched this small boy teaching his younger brother how to use these curious sickle-shaped knives. Then we met older members of the community, a couple of girls on the left, and then the boys. What fine upstanding fellows they are, bright and cheerful, and young girls again. I must tell you that young girls in this part of the world marry very early, the same way they do in India. Look at this smiling girl here, look at that chubby baby, and this one with a ring in her nose and a hoop in her neck, and the boys here with their shiny faces covered with coconut oil to keep the sun from burning them. Let us look at two of the younger ladies. What cheerful faces they have. And a young girl with a big future ahead of her. News soon came in of rhino tracks seen on the sand, a big three-toed mark, unmistakable. Off we went on foot. Elephants were sent, but they took a different route, and we established ourselves near an open patch of jungle. One of the men in the jungle brush signaled to me that he heard rhino approaching. Vernie got annoyed and threw a stick at him to tell him to be quiet, otherwise he would frighten the game. We did not wait long. The next moment, a big rhino trundled out of the jungle like an express train, with a baby rhino behind. I cranked the camera busily, for such a sight had seldom been seen before, and no camera had ever recorded it. We sent beaters in immediately to see if they could not drive the rhino out again at a more favorable point for to be photographed. And sure enough, out they came within barely 50 feet of the camera. A rhino is very blind, and the rhino fortunately did not see the camera or myself behind it. I don't think I've ever seen such a grotesque animal as that rhino, and as I cranked the camera, I almost laughed to myself at the sight. You will notice the enormously thick hide, the great cracks in the armor plate, the concertina effect around the neck, and the huge bat-like ears, and the single horn on the nose. Shortly after this, we came across tracks of another rhino. We followed him up, and a good shot from Vernie's rifle, and he was laid out. Once again, the tedious operation of measuring had to be gone through in order that the animal might be mounted in an absolutely natural and perfect position at the Museum of Natural History in New York. Look at that hide. Did you ever see anything so rough? It is covered with lumps and bumps and cracks and crevices. There's nothing smooth about it. Around the neck, you will see that concertina effect. Look at that enormous foot with the great big toes. Those three toes make an unmistakable mark in the sand. The tusk with which he does so much damage, the small eye, the single horn on the nose, and the big bat-like ear. Our rhino is out in the sun. We must turn him over, roll him into the shade, because our taxidermist is not ready to start skinning operations. To turn a rhino over is no child's play, but the natives help willingly, for they realize that there's to be a banquet at the end of it. After some effort, he rolls over, and now we must cover him up. We must get branches and leaves so that the sun will not shine on him, so that the jackals won't come after him, and especially so that the vultures overhead will not seek their prey out. And on the edge of the jungle, we saw a small sambar deer come out and feeding as it went. It was a lovely creature. He seemed to be quite unconscious of us. We watched him feeding for a little time, his lovely big ears. Then he seemed to feel a little uneasy and walked back into the thicket, and we continued our way through some tall grass and then down into a very dark patch of jungle. We heard noises ahead of us, so we sent Bothery Nunja up a tree to look out, to see what it was that was responsible for those sounds. Up the tree he went, just like a monkey. These people live in the jungle, and they're just as much at home in the trees as they are on the ground below. Then it didn't take him long to scale that sapling and then transferred himself to the trunk of the other tree and out upon a branch, at the further extremity of which he stopped, and he looked out amongst a hole in the treetops. He stepped back a few paces and looked again, and there in an open grassy patch he saw the backs of elephants moving through the grass. He hurriedly descended from his lofty perch and told us all about it. In characteristic manner, he pointed with his chin, not with his arm. We left one or two men up in trees to tell us if elephants passed by. And as we went ahead, we heard crashing in the branches, and there we saw a cow elephant with her calves, pushing them ahead, and then others following. Evidently they sensed danger and were trying to get away before it was too late. In an open place we came across this male elephant by himself, a small tusker. He seemed quite unconcerned. He wasn't bothering about any members of his family. He was wandering about by himself, probably wondering what sort of life it was he was leading. Then came out a cow elephant. She looked as if she was going out shopping. She was starting out and evidently going somewhere. But then came the sensation. Out from the thicket came this tusker elephant towards us. He evidently had a bad and evil disposition. We could see it in his eye. He came right up towards where the camera stood. We began to get nervous. We didn't want to shoot him. Vernie, you'll have to shoot. Look out. Bang. And away he went just in time. That was a lucky thing for us. The next moment, an elephant came crashing through the branches, and one shot from Vernie laid him out, and we came up to him. One shot through the brain, and he sat down just as if he had been alive. First thing to do was to examine the tusks. They were a fine pair. And then his ears. We wanted to see how old he was. But you will notice that the ears are quite flat and have no turnover at the top. He must be about 30 years old, that fellow, no more. And who would have thought that such a benign-looking elephant could have ever been a rogue elephant or had a bad disposition? but yet we know that he had, and the people were glad that we had shot him. We looked at his foot. 5 times, twice the diameter of the foot gives the height of the animal at the shoulder. The circumference in that case was 5 feet, which gives us 10 feet when the elephant was standing. The taxidermist soon arrived and with tape measure started to take measurements. Most important, that the elephant should be measured carefully so that when he appeared in the museum, he would be true to life. When an elephant puts his foot down, he means something. And look at that tail. What an interesting tail to have, with those bristles at the end of it. Skinning operations were soon in full swing, and the Sholigers carried it back to camp. And we left them dancing. They were glad that their rogue elephant had been killed, and life in the jungle would now be secure for a time. A week later, we found ourselves back in civilization, shipping our magnificent trophies to New York and preparing for further efforts. The local taxi cab, or ekka, is not a comfortable vehicle to ride in, but they are used extensively by the Indian people. If we wander about the streets, we will see many amusing sights, such as this, for instance, where a young musician is pouring out his heart and soul to some ladies on the opposite side of the street. In India, we find many women wearing veils. Here is one dressed up in her long white garment. We see them in the bazaars purchasing material. We will also see them being carried along the streets in litters. They travel sometimes in closed litters, such as you see on the screen now. Not all women are in purdah or veiled. Here is a pretty Indian girl whom we are glad to look at, and her small brother, who is evidently a lover of dogs. In the brass bazaar, we will take a stroll, and it's amusing to see the man switching away the flies from off his big brass jars, whereas if we look at him close range, we will see flies seated on his head and also on the faces of the boys round about him. There are no free deliveries here, and if you buy a jar, you must carry it home. And if you don't like it, you'll have to carry it back again. You see everybody carrying bundles, and under such conditions, you would think traffic should be regulated. Here is a prospective applicant for a traffic cop. I'm sure he would make an excellent one when he grew up. From the contemplation and enjoyment of such scenes, let us go and see a Nautch girl dancing. Nautch girls are well known to every traveler in India, although I must admit that the dancing, so far as it goes, is rather disappointing. nevertheless, the orchestra is interesting, especially the man with the drums, which he plays with extraordinary vigor. These Nautch girls carry all their money they own in the world on their backs, in the form of jewelry. She puts no money in the bank, but invests it in ornaments which she wears in her dancing. Back once more now into the streets, and we see men impersonating women, and the laughter which they provoke on all sides is tremendous. As usual, we have the orchestra playing vigorously in the rear, and frequently singing as they play. Let us now visit a still poorer quarter of the town and see the barber shops in full swing. All along the streets, you're apt to see beggars of some sort or another, and if they're not beggars or people selling odds and ends, they are holy men asking alms from the passer-by. India is a land full of religion. There are many sects, and every 3 days, one of which is devoted to some form of religious ceremony. Outside of Calcutta, for instance, are the Batu caves, and here members of the community repair once or twice a year to repent of their sins. The most extraordinary things take place, and the individuals who are appointed to represent their community inflict the most terrible tortures on themselves in order to atone for the sins of those whom they represent. Here is a man who has starved himself for 3 months before attending the ceremony. This man is dancing in circles, round and round, until he reaches the shrine. A few days later, one of the shikaris brought in a baby cheetal or spotted deer to camp. It was a lovely little animal, and that reminded us that we must go out and get some photographs of them. We mounted our elephants, and with many men on foot, we set out. We employed the lame, the halt, and the blind, because it was difficult to get jungle people here in this part of the world. At first, we mounted the camera on the back of the elephant, but unfortunately, the only pictures we got were of the deer running by as we approached. They were interesting, however, as studies in motion. Then comes a wild pig. You see him bowling along like a ton of bricks. What a fat fellow he is. And here comes some nilgai. These are not of the deer family, they are bovines. Rather awkward fellows. We then transferred the camera to the stump of a tree and covered it with leaves and branches, and were more successful in our photographic efforts. On one occasion, a whole herd of cheetal came up towards the camera. They approached very cautiously, and then hearing the noise, the whir, they suddenly stopped and up with their heads. This was a strange sound. They'd never heard the like of it before, and rather than run any risks, they decided to go off and take another direction away from the camera. Now, instead of getting pictures of that kind, let us try a water hole. I know a little water hole far off in the jungle. So let us mount a pad elephant or two and go off to this spot and see what luck we have. On our way there, we passed through some dense forest thickets, and the elephant had to clear a path in order that we might follow. An elephant understands over 100 distinct words of command. He is rather blind. He cannot see very clearly, and he depends largely upon the mahout on the top of his head to direct him. If a tree is in the way, the mahout tells him to bring his imposing personality to bear upon it, and you'll watch the results. If a log is in the way, the mahout tells him to lift up his feet. When we got through this dense thicket, we found the little water hole that we were looking for, and on the bank was a big crocodile sunning himself. But we shouted to drive him away because we wanted to get the spotted deer. Shortly after the camera was put up, a sounder of wild pig came down to drink. They were dirty fellows, and we were glad to see them go. Later on, some jungle fowl came. These are the progenitors of all domesticated fowls, and as such are extremely interesting. At last, the rustling in the grass proclaimed the spotted deer that we were hoping to get photographs of. They came out from the jungle one by one, the hinds and the babies first. They are very nervous. They think a leopard may be lurking in the thicket, ready to spring out upon them. Last of all comes the stag himself, the father of the family, to take his drink. Eventually, even he goes away, and the only one left behind was a small and graceful hind with a lovely shiny coat. But she's very nervous, and off she goes like a flash within a few moments. Beneath my own tree stood the elephant with his trunk up in the air. I got wind of a tiger, and I told the mahout to carry on back into the line. Off he went, and none too soon, for out came a tigress and stood quite unconcernedly under a patch of dense jungle. They were not in the least bit alarmed, probably a little annoyed at being disturbed. A tusker in the ring was beating about, and each time the tiger appeared, up went the trunk of the elephant. The elephant has a keen sense of smell and was quick to detect the presence of the tiger. In comes the ring, drawing closer and closer. The tiger is going to be doomed on this occasion. The elephants will be standing so close that there'll be no chance of escape. Out in the grass, another elephant is barging about in all the dense patches so as to disturb the tiger if it is possibly in that area. While I'm in the tree, I again see a tiger come out, showing signs of agitation by its quick movements. In comes the ring, closer and closer all the time. Up go the elephant's trunk. And right ahead of me, there's a tiger looking out of the jungle, snarling and making a demonstration. I nod to the man in the howdah alongside of me, and he brings the ring out into the grass and draws it up into the position that I indicate. He knows there's a tiger in that grass. He's waving his rifle in the direction the mahout must take with his elephant. The elephant smells the tiger, and there he comes. Right between the eyes. A wonderful shot as the tiger was clawing the elephant's trunk. made a bad gash. But with those teeth and those claws, the tiger can do a tremendous amount of damage. On the undersurface of the paw, it is soft, and it is on those soft pads that the tiger steals stealthily about the jungle. Here comes the second tiger out. The elephants are aware of it. The tiger is snarling there when the man in the outer sees it. He has a shot, and again, but he's missed. The tiger comes on, and again he shoots. The tiger has breathed his last. And the elephants crowd round to see what he looks like. But the elephants don't like the tiger, and again they edge off to one side, refusing to go near him. Watch them now, how they object to going near the dead tiger in the grass. Up in my tree, I take a final view of the scene enacted. Some of the sportsmen standing round, admiring the kill. He's a magnificent specimen. In the trees, the vultures are waiting. I leave them there and get down from my own perch. It's a hot day and I want to get some close-ups of the tiger on the ground. What a wonderful animal that is. A litter had to be made to carry him. He weighed nearly 600 pounds. And it was all 20 men could do to lift him on the back of the elephant. He measured 10 feet 2 inches from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail. The jungle people crowded around about, delighted to help whenever it was possible. For here the tiger is dead, and life in the jungle will once more be safe for them and their animals until other tigers come and take the place of those that have been shot. We must now return to camp. We've been out on a long day's shoot. We have got 3 fine tigers. Here is the prize, and then back to camp we go. The second tiger seen following on another elephant, and the people in the camp move off to one side as the elephant approaches, bearing the results of the day's sport. The first thing to be done is to attend to the wounds of the elephants. This elephant has been bitten in the tail by a tiger, and the wound has to be washed with permanganate of potash so that it will not turn septic and the elephant die. The elephant stands or kneels down patiently. 3 fine tigers, and so our great adventure came to an end, and we turned our faces homewards. We carried with us some wonderful specimens of jungle animals, but above all, memories of jungle life in India that will remain with us all our lives.